near the end of the month, next month, this coming month. Well, I looked at it and I said, I should sit here, because I've been sitting next to him all morning. Well, we've been whispering in each other's ears, sweet nothings. Oh.
He's,
It's very close.
we have a very good relationship.
Very close. It's humorous. We have
Check. Check 1, 2. Test, test, test.
How are we doing now? Everybody who wants to be here is here. All right. Well, I just said it was a bit of good news. A bit. Okay. Yeah. Well, good morning again, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Joe Osborne. I am the treasurer for the church and is also head of the finance committee, which we're going to change the name. We usually refer to ourselves when we're in email of like the FC, da-da-da-da-da. So we're going to change the name to the fund committee and keep the same moniker, so it'll be just fine. So what I wanted to do this morning is something that I didn't think has been done, and certainly, I think in my time here at the church, and that is to come back at the end of a year, a fiscal year, and report on how we did. Typically, in the past, what I remember is we'll put the budget together, we get everybody in front of it, here's the budget, da-da-da-da, and then halfway through the next year, I get up here in February and go, here's what the first half did, but we don't circle back and close the loop on the prior fiscal year. And one of the driving things for the Finance Committee this year is to enhance and improve transparency of all of the data that we collect, all the financial data we collect. One of the things that we have started to do religiously a few months ago, is in the middle hallway there, you can find the latest financial statements that we look at. And by the way, those glass doors are slidable. So you can reach in and take it and read it and take a photograph if you want and put them back. Please put them back, okay? And I've also, and you'll see a copy of it here. When we deal with financial statements, there's a lot of numbers. I mean, if you look at a profit or loss statement, it goes on for like 2 pages with all the detail. And that can be intimidating to a lot of people because it's just a lot of stuff. There's a balance sheet, and if you don't know what that means, and then, you know, it can be very confusing. So what I've done is, and what the Finance Committee has agreed to, is we're now doing a high-level view that you can see out there that basically looks at things like we would normally look at ourselves in our home. Total income, where's it coming from? Expenses in the total, and then the net at the bottom. I think most people can kind of understand those kinds of things, so you can see that out there. And if you do want to see the detail, it's available. In fact, if you want it emailed to you, let me know. I mean, all of this stuff is free and clear to the congregation. There's no, if you want to become a fund committee member, you know, get my email address. With that, Brian, you want to give me the next slide? So while the budget expected a loss of $82,312, the actual loss was $33,027. So we were almost $50,000 to the better versus the budget. Now we did take a loss, but it was not anywhere near what we had projected. Reasons for that: we spent $13,000 less on salaries and wages. $20,819 in realized gains due to stock market success. Okay. $21,576 from a pandemic-era payroll credit from the government, and $35,000 from the legacy fund. Now, that's the good news. Brian?
On the stats, you know, I quibble over realized and unrealized gains.
Right.
Okay? Did we actually pull money out?
Not that money, no.
Captured that $20,000?
Mike, please.
No, we didn't.
Okay, so that's.
It's reinvested in the stock fund.
It's reinvested?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's still there. It just gets reinvested, and hopefully you gain more gains on your gains.
All right.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because one of the things, and I'll talk a little bit more about this after, one of the things we're talking about at the Finance Committee is ways to reduce the risk of a stock portfolio. So we're looking at perhaps moving some of that money that's in the stock portfolio to a CD or a true stock fund, but probably more likely a CD, so we can kind of reduce risk on that, especially now when the market is going so nuts. I mean, this is the time you take a look at that and say, I think it's time to pull some of that out and put it into a CD.
Take some money off the table.
Yeah, make it a little less risky, okay? Xenia?
Microphone, please.
It's basically,
On? Oh.
There you go.
Why does the stock market stuff affect the budget?
that is what we call realized gain. In other words, we have money in the stock market. We don't do anything with it. We're not playing day trade or anything like that. It's this there. And as the market goes up, you get dividends and you get interest on your money. That's what that number represents. So it's a source of income. We're listing it on the financial statement as other income. It's not at the top line. It's more in the bottom line as other income. Oh, yes. I don't have that detail, but if I had to go back and look, just off the top of my head, there's probably a gap between, we we had projected that we would pay for Jimmy for the entire year, and we didn't, and then we brought in Lily late in the game, so I think that's where that's pretty much where the 13,000 came from.
Could you
Yeah, Jimmy and Fidelity, those two not to be in there.
tell us how much the church has invested in the market?
I sure will. I have it on my phone. I carry it with me always. Right now, our LPL financial stock, this is as of the end of August, okay, is $419,126. And we had, at that time, $104,000 in CDs. Now, since that time, we've moved one of the CDs that matured at the end of August. We moved that into our checking account because our checking account, that actually came out of our checking account at one point in time. We moved it back in the checking account because the checking account was getting low. So we made that move. If things continue to be a problem, there's another CD that matures in April. And if we have to pull that into the checking account, we will. But that's part of the game plan for this year. There's another $7,400 in a money market account that we can draw out from too. Those are all resources that we can draw from. And now this is kind of the good news from last year. Now, the flip side of this is this year, we only have $15,000 from the legacy fund. We don't have 35 coming in. We're not going to get the 21.5 from a pandemic era payroll credit. That's a one-time deal. If the market continues well, perhaps we can realize those gains. Who knows? Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, that is, we understand that, markets can go up, markets can go down. There's no question. That's why we're actually entertaining the idea of maybe moving some of that fund out of there and putting it into a more secure location. It's a good time to do it when you're doing really well in the market. Exactly. And that decision will be made within the next 30 to 60 days, more than likely. Any more questions about this, how we did better than last year? Okay, Brian, next slide, please. Now, this is a bit of an eye chart. This is you can't, I know. I'm going to have to read some of this to you. Let me have the walk around mic, please. So over here, this is kind of a high-level view of how the year ended, and it's similar to what you're going to find out here in the middle hallway every month. Now, you have to realize when we put it in the hallway, the one that's out there right now is for the month of July, and the reason for that is we don't get the July statement to look at until the end of July, Finance Committee. The Finance Committee then has to go to the board the next month and have it approved. So in August, we got it approved. And I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I took that and posted it here. So there's going to be a lag in that information, just so everybody understands that. But it'll be done on a routine basis. The next board meeting is, we just looked at August this past week with the Finance Committee. Next month, the board meeting is the third Thursday. We'll then review that, get that approved, and I'll post it again at the church. So if you look at income, this is our pledges paid, funding the mission in your total. Now, you see the difference here. There's other forms of income like the auction, for instance. Okay, I know. And I tried like bejesus to get these things bigger, and I just can't fit it on a slide. So total pledges last year, $313,836.97 came in. Our budget was $335,955. We were off by $22,000. Okay. Then funding the mission, this also includes things like the auction, any kind of rental of the property, any income like that. So we totaled out at $371 versus $384 on the budget, $371,911 versus $384,855. So we're off the budget there by about $12,000. Supporting our staff in ministry, this is the total in basically in payroll right here. 354, 628 versus 367, 576. This is where the $13,000 in savings came in. Total of all expenses. Now this includes everything you can possibly imagine. The electricity, the telephone, the heat, all the program expenses that we run. So the total of all expenses was 482, 335 versus 502, 167 in the budget. Our net ordinary income was $110,000 off. Now, when you take a look at other income, you start transferring $35,000 from legacy. You have other income of $21,576, which is the government, $20,000, $20,819.95, which is our gains from the stock market, and that's how we wind up with the $33,027 negative versus a budget of $82,312. So a replica of this will be out in the little hallway there. Yes, sir. Yes.
Can't hear him.
The question is, why don't you go ahead and ask that again?
Just a suggestion that this good table could be either in the newsletter or mailed separately to everybody who gets the newsletter.
That is definitely doable, and it's something we can do. I'll talk to the finance committee and the board about doing that. I don't have a problem with that. It means if it's going to go out here every month, why not just send it out? Well, also, I'll be up here like quarterly instead of semi-annually too to report on stuff. Like I'll be back. Well, now with this, I'll probably be back in a couple of months to talk about the first quarter results, and then in February it'll be the mid-year results. So we want to be able to supply everyone with all the information we can about what's going on financially. Because I think the more that we understand, the better off we'll be. Whether it's bad news, good news, whatever news, it needs to be disseminated. Yes, Dennis?
How many pledgers are there? And do they, I know in the past they've tended to skew really, most of the pledges came from a very few people. And is that still the case?
I don't have a number for you on total pledges, but your point about the number of pledges is kind of spread out. But the amount of pledges, I think you're absolutely correct. I think there are some people who are very generous who give us money annually. And that has always been the case, and that is still the case. In fact, I was just talking to Brian earlier today, and I had concerns about the amount of pledges in July, and then by the August report that came in, it was a little better. One of the reasons it was lower is that a lot of our larger annual pledging comes in March, April, May of next year. So it's kind of a back end, like a backfilled financial picture. But yeah, you're right. That's still pretty much the case.
How many pledgers are there?
I don't have that number, Dennis, not on the top of my head. I can get it for you, but I don't have it at the top of my head.
Excuse me, Joe.
Yes.
We have a chat message from David Barber Smith.
Okay.
Realizing our gains involves selling part of our stocks or receiving and keeping dividends.
That would be correct. This is keeping our that number represents keeping our dividends and any interest, whatever, in the stock fund. Yeah, and that's part of the reserve fund. That's the LPL Financial Fund. Are there any other questions? Brian? Hmm?
Is there more presentation?
This is it.
Oh, that's it. Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, let's take a stab at a couple. I know that this is based on last year. What is this year's annual budget projected the deficit to be?
Hang on 1 second. I have the numbers up here. It's a negative 87,000.
And what is the actual projected budget?
Total amount?
Need Mike.
The next question is, what's the total annual budget? And that is $472,631.
Okay, so the projected deficit is more than 20%, is about 20% or more than 20%?
That's about that, yeah.
All right, once upon, I think I said this at the annual meeting. Once upon a time, I had no problem with a 10% deficit for a budget. That's easy. Now we're up to 20% projected with nothing special happening other than 15,000 coming from the legacy fund for match giving, which was designed to try to help people give more money
Right.
as time has gone by. Dennis has raised the question about membership and whether or not, he didn't use these words, so these are mine. Do we have a static membership? Do we have a dynamic membership? Are we going backwards? I would venture to say we're static, really, right at the moment, for people who understand what those terms mean. My question to you is, if we're going to use reserves, and assuming, dangerous word, that our budget's going to look much the same as it does now, with about an $80,000 deficit, how long can we sustain that without a significant increase in pledging?
With all things equal, we've got $228,000 in what we call the operating fund, which includes all of the monies and the funds and everything else. But that's what's the word I'm looking for? They're not, it's funds that are not unrestricted. Thank you, David. They're unrestricted, it's unrestricted money. So if you was to assume, and let's say for the sake of, $80,000 deficit, you would have a couple of years, a year and 2.5 years with that?
Okay. One of the line items that I looked at the budget at the end of the year was publicity. And my interpretation of that was that we didn't spend anything of substance on publicity the past year or even the year before. And I am wondering what, and this may not be under your purview, Joe,
Yeah.
but what do we expect from the board retreat, the communications that are going on to get the message that we're not the best kept secret in town? When I first came to this church in 2002, some of you may remember Kitty McConkey. Others of you would not know who that person is. But Kitty was deeply involved with the UUA, and so back in 2002, she made it very clear the city of Ventura has a population that should sustain a congregation of 300 people. Well, here we are. It's 22 years later, and yeah, we've had COVID. And we don't advertise. We don't seem to tell anybody anything, and yet you and I had the conversation that over this last 10 or 12 or 15 years that we've been giving away the plate, which we understand to be really cast in stone,
Yeah.
we have probably given away over $500,000 to other organizations.
Yeah, that's about right, because as we talked about earlier, and I've had a view into this,
And-
we collect roughly $40,000 to $50,000 a year from the plate.
And I
that
know
all
that
gets
there's-
given away.
And I know that there's value in relationships, but there's a part of me that says, when are these relationships coming into our door on Sunday?
Good question.
Okay, and so is that part of the conversations that you in finance and you with the board?
So
The
let me-
clock is ticking.
yeah,
That's
let me
what I'm
just-
getting at. The clock is ticking.
Oh, there's no doubt the clock is ticking. I mean, you don't have to be a financial genius to look at the numbers and realize that. We're not in a bad spot as of right now. But the point you raised about publicity is a valid one. And when, we're trying to re-energize a publicity team, we can do a better job of that, I'm sure. As far as, I've had 2 meetings of the board, so you're going to have, my board exposure has been very minimal, okay? But I will tell you this, though. One of the 3 driving principles that the board picked up there's another term for it. You know what the term is on this. But I call them driving principles. One of the questions we have is, how do we reach financial stability and sustainability? And that's top of mind for the board going forward, and the finance committee. We had an interesting finance committee meeting this week. And it was fun. We do. No matter what the numbers say, we have fun. Okay? It's a really good group of people. It's a great group of people that we have on the finance committee. But we've started to talk about things like, all right, the operating fund, which is something that's unrestricted, shows us, we just mentioned this, $238,000 to $228,000. How long do we have with this? What do we need to do? What are the things in the future we may have to think about in terms of how do we reach financial sustainability and stability? So there's a lot of irons in the fire from a thought process on that right now, and that will continue, and that will bubble up to the board through me as we move forward, because it's a critical idea, a critical item. I mean, it just is. Yes, sir.
Question, did you cite the number we actually,
Oh, yeah.
pledges paid, what's the revenue from pledges, okay? What's the revenue, I didn't hear that.
Okay. I'll have to shout. $313,836 came in from pledges.
That's about what percent of the budget, roughly?
You're better at this than I am. 75%. About 75%.
Sorry about the long walk.
Yes, Brian. Open questions. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I guess with this emphasis on transparency, I could ask some questions I've been curious about. You won't be able to answer it, but it would be nice to get the information. And that is, what is the distribution of pledges? What fraction of pledges, $100, $50, $1,000?
Oh, my.
You don't
Just,
have that.
just
Is there
off the
some-
top of my head, I can tell
No,
you,
no,
it
but
goes
is there
from
some
like
way- is there
$5
some-
a week to
is there
like
somebody-
tens of
some way of
thousands of dollars a year. So, I
is there
mean,
some way
it's,
of getting that information?
we have that information. But it'd be interesting to look at that distribution, but I can tell you it's spread over from like $5 a week
Oh, well,
to,
Yeah, I'm sure it's a spread.
tens
If I
of
give
thousands a
you my email
year.
address, could you send it to me?
What's that?
If I give you my email address, could you send it to me?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, I'd like to see that as well, Joe.
Yeah,
Although I
it would
will
be
see
interesting
it being on the
statistic, it really
finance
would.
team.
I know we have the data, it's just a matter of putting it together, that's all. Yeah, it's to put it together. Anyone else? Ruth?
So I just want to reiterate, so 75% of our operating budget comes in from pledges, which means we have 25% of our operating budget that we either have to reduce or find another way to fund. That's what that real message is. And personally, from what I've seen, asking for increased pledges, I do not see as a way of closing this gap under the current membership. So that's kind of where this is why I joined the finance team, so that I could get a better understanding of where we are. And we always hear, oh, we're in great shape. And for churches, we probably are in really good shape. I mean, we don't have a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
of
unquestionably,
pages
we're in
that
better
have
shape than most churches, for
$400,000
sure.
in reserve. And having to take and fill a 25% budget gap every year, that $400,000 is not going to last very long because it's not really growing. It's dependent on the stock market, and if the stock market plummets, we won't necessarily have time to regain our losses before that 25% bill comes in every year. So
Sure.
that's
Now,
just,
the one piece of good news that I heard recently from Reverend Dana on membership is that at the last membership meeting, there were 11 people that signed in and went to that meeting. So there is some growth happening.
One thing we don't have is a mortgage.
That's true. I'm glad you raised that because having been a moderator at a local church, you are absolutely right. I mean, we own this property free and clear, which is absolutely unusual, okay, among other churches in the area. It's just doesn't happen. So there, and obviously, Dennis, we've talked about that. I mean, I call it the DEFCON 1. If you go to DEFCON 1 and you really had to, we have this property. And the value of this property is several millions of dollars. So there's still a lot of resource available. It's going to be, I think it's going to be critical in the next few years to evaluate where the money's coming in, how much can we really expect from pledging, and then how do we utilize what we have in a prudent manner. It's like I was mentioning earlier, this may be the time to move money out of the stock fund and into a more secure CD type of thing while the market's high.
Hi, just a quick question.
Yes, Sylvia.
Who is involved in this publicity group that's starting? And it seems to me that question of how do we spread the word, that we are here, that, we have a lot to offer the community, the wider community. Who's in charge of that? And
I don't
how will
know.
that go?
I don't know that we have anyone in charge of that right now. It would be a board thing. Yeah. Ultimately, it's the board. That'll be a question I'll bring to the board meeting next month too. Is what are we doing with publicity? What can we do? How can we enhance that? It's not really my purview as being the treasurer, but I think it has an impact. So I think it's a question worth asking. Kitty was. I don't know if that's still the case.
The only one that I know of is Kate Higgins is
Yes.
keeping up the website.
Yes.
And I didn't even think to ask her to post stuff for the auction. I just forgot, and I realized, to me, that's something the publicity team should be doing without having to be asked to do. And I went in and checked the website, and the auction wasn't even on the website until like a couple weeks ago. So that's some of the proactiveness that I would love for an advertising committee or whatever to be doing. So anyway, that's one of my auction frustrations. Anyway, we have another
Sure.
question.
I actually don't have a question, I have a statement. So I used to be on the InReach Outreach Committee for, 5 years or something, maybe more. And we used to get in with the pledges to other, the plate, thank you. About $800 to $1,000 every single week. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Now we just counted again, and this is pretty true because I've been counting too. Now, and it's now $300, about 200 to 300. No, on plate. That's right. I've never seen it personally go over 300. Well, let's say 400, whatever. The plate. Oh, sorry. So anyway, I went a while back, and I've always felt like we should be giving away half, maybe every other week, instead of, even when I was on InReach Outreach. But someone came from Boston a couple of years back, and I brought it up, and she said that what happens is if we don't give it away, wait, I'll see if I get this right. If we give it away, people continue their pledge. If we don't give it away, they have an idea that every week that pledge money is going into the church, and they can pledge less. So that's been sort of their statistical
Yeah,
idea.
that actually makes sense because if people thought that their weekly, giving was part of their pledge, then your pledges are not going to grow, and you're not going to be doing some good work in the community. So it'll be a two-shot swing in the wrong direction.
I had a point to make about the offering. It's very difficult, when you do the counting, you don't see but a fraction of what comes in, because a lot comes in electronically now. And so you know, I can't tell you what that is, but it's a considerable amount because it's convenient.
Yeah, I want to talk about this a little bit. You know, it's been a long time since I was board president, and I did that for quite a number of years. When Dana first got here, that's when the idea of a $35,000 match, I think it was a $25,000 match, and then a $15,000 match from the Legacy Fund. And it was very successful the first time that we did it, and then we did it a second time a few years later, and that's what we're working on right at the moment. And the idea behind that was to get people to raise their pledge amounts, okay? And by and large, that was pretty successful. But it also kind of speaks to the issue that at the time, when we were talking about budgets back then, we asked the congregation the question, how do you feel about splitting up the offering and doing away with half of it or something along those lines? And it came back quite resoundingly, no, because the offering, the way we do it, is a part of our identity as Unitarian Universalists. We are generous. And it doesn't surprise me that, you know, on the scale that you're looking for, we did the graphs that show that we have a lot of people between $0 and $100, most of the congregation. And then there's about 20% of the congregation that it spikes on, where we have incredibly generous people by comparison. It doesn't mean they aren't less generous in their hearts and that kind of thing. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? But it is a numbers game, and you're not trying to have your doors open just to get people in to get their donations and their money. I think Dana hit it right on the head. It's about relationship. And we all have that going on, and COVID's been going on for a while. We're kind of coming out of it, but we seem to slide back into it, and people seem to be afraid to gather. And, you know, not this week, but I think the last couple of weeks, I think I saw at least 100 people in the congregation. And I said, boy, that is a huge improvement, because during the COVID period, we had a time where we started with only 25 people coming into the sanctuary. And then we creeped it up to 35, and then we got to 50, and there was a lot of anxiety about, am I going to get COVID if I come to church? And common sense was, if you're sick, stay home. Thank you, Reverend Dana. You're sick, stay home. Okay? And it doesn't mean if you had COVID, if you got the flu, a cold, whatever it is, stay home. That's what being a community is about. So I don't think, though, that the offering is ever likely to be a place that we will go to and compromise it in any way, shape, or form. It's just not. But when I look at value, and I'm a business guy, I tend to wonder, you know, we're giving out to the community. We're absolutely doing that. And gosh darn it, I'd sure like to see the community come back and help us out a little bit too. And you don't get that unless you advertise in some way. Not just on the internet, not just with Twitter, not with X and all that stuff, but you got to get word of mouth out there. You got to be talking this up with your friends and your family and the people at the grocery store and anybody that you come into. Some people wear their badges when they go out, okay? You know, they wear a T-shirt that says, you know, I'm a Unitarian Universalist. I want to attract attention. You have something on your license plate cover, something on your car, and you're proud. You're proud of your faith.
Excellent.
Joe?
You know,
real
and
quick.
to add on to Brian's story, I was just faced with a question 2 weeks ago that speaks to who we are, I believe. There was a trans group in Santa Barbara, and they wanted to have, and they don't pay for their space in Santa Barbara, they wanted to open a Ventura location. And so Jen had sent me and Gina an email and said, what do you think? Now, as the finance guy, I would have said, sure, let's bring them in and we'll charge them $50 a night or whatever. No. No, they're going to have some room here to build that group, and there's no charge. Because you have to, this is called living your faith, okay? It's called living your faith. There's not a price tag on everything. You can't have a price tag on everything. And if you want to grow as a church, I think that can be one of the driving principles, which is you don't have a price tag on everything. You know, I think if people knew how much I'll tell you my own personal story, which is I came to this church through Lift Up Your Voice. I actually did some work as a photographer, building some display units. And that's how I'm like, who is this Unitarian? What is this all about? And that's what brought me into this church. And then when I came in and they said, we give away the plate every week, I was like, these people are insane. Like, what is this all about? Okay? Because I'd never been in a church where anybody ever did that. So that speaks volumes for us, but as Brian's pointed out, I think, and I'll bring this to the board, this will be a board discussion next month, is that how do we improve our publicity? What do we need to do? What can we put in place? Because, we couldn't do it. I think we can do a better job. We have done a better job in the past. I think we have to get back to that.
Hey,
I'm
Joe?
only a finance guy, but I'm on board with that concept.
Joe,
Yes.
Aaron Merrill has put in the chat, everyone is welcome to join the publicity team.
What was your statement?
Aaron Merrill stated in the chat that everyone is welcome to join the publicity team.
Ah. Any charge for? Yeah. Like I said, this will be a board discussion. Because I need to find out, again, my focus has been on finances, okay? But I think as a board discussion, we need to talk about, what's happening with publicity, who's on it, what do we need to do, how many people do we need to add to the team, or how do we move forward with that? Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a church discussion where I think Aaron is saying we need more people. If we want better publicity, we need people to join. And yeah, so I mean, it's not just a board discussion, it's a whole church discussion.
Yeah, obviously, if we had 6 or 7 people that all of a sudden raise their hands and say, hey, I'll do this, yeah, it's problem solved. Yes.
When we moved to Pasadena, we already knew about the church. Moved.
We lost the mic here. There we go.
But one of the first things we did was go to the movies. We went to the Laemmle, and before the show started, there was a full screen thing that said, "My God is better than your God," and then underneath it, it if you can get something like that for free. I mean, I don't know if we have a connection to a theater, if everyone watching the Barbie movie had seen something like that about here. The other thing is I've been at the welcome table for years there, and people come when they have children. They start thinking about where they're going to go, and I don't know how we get to that market, if you want to call it that. And the other thing is, I can't tell you how many people, I'd say under the age of 35, saw the website. They go sort of church shopping on the web, and so the website's really important. And those are the 2 ways I've seen people come.
All right. Mr. Zinnick.
I just had a moment of inspiration listening to Brian suggest that I wear my name tag when I'm out in public. And if I do, I'm sure people are going to, it's got a symbol of a chalice on it, and people are going to ask me, what is that? And I'll have an opportunity to give my elevator speech. We all have talked about, you should have your elevator speech prepared, where you give like a 30-second description of what the UU Church is, as if you were riding an elevator and somebody asked you what is it, and you just had that small amount of time to describe it. That I can see how as individuals that might be a way that we could all reach out to those that we know and have a personal story to tell that might bring in some visitors. So I think that's a great idea, and I'm going to start doing it.
All good ideas. Yes, sir.
Some thoughts. I remember the first time I ever heard of the Unitarian Church. Well, I remember it twofold, but it used to be that our newspapers now are national in scope and not local. They don't give a darn what's our community. I remember my Ann Arbor News every Saturday had like half a page dedicated to church news, and it had a little summary of that service and what the church is about, and it was free. Unheard of now. So my point is, we are not alone. Something happened to us in the pandemic. There have been news reports, you Google the topic, participation in civic organizations, whether it be the Rotary or churches or whatever, it is way down nationally, not just us. So I really think, you'll see surveys that part of people who want to develop their cities say one of the biggest problems is so many Americans are lonely because they have no connection with anything. And how you connect with those people, I don't know. I really don't think advertising in the newspaper is worth the time. Maybe something more like our free publications, which cover the news better than the newspaper. Do they have a spot for a local community announcement? What are our local newspapers? Finally, I think the younger people are not dogmatic, and that is certainly us. And it's, as a marketer would say, find your market. Do we know how to do that?
Kathy.
I just kind of want to reiterate that too. I have a cousin that is a priest, and it's remarkable how many of their schools are closing down. Their churches are starting to close down to where it used to be there was a Catholic church in every single community, small community in Buffalo. And now like the churches are closing down because there's no participation. And it's mostly the younger generation is not on board with all of that. And so it's not just us, but not that we still can't do something. I always said I wish we could just put some kind of bulletin up at the schools where the kids are about our church and just say, looking for a church, come here, we're the church for you, or just really easy, nothing that would be, I don't think, bad to do. I mean, is there some reason why anybody thinks that we can't?
Yeah, exactly.
We are not evangelical, so, we want, and this is not about the school thing, but we kind of want to draw a line between publicity and being evangelical. I mean, we're not going to go knocking on doors. We're not going to have big posters about, I don't know. I mean, we do want to get our message out, but we're not an evangelical church, so there's a limit to that.
That's very true, and I think Gary actually brought up a very good point, and that is, I think and in fact, Reverend Dana will correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure, but most people come to churches because they know someone in that church. That's the primary method of people coming in, and so Gary's method of wearing your name, and I have to get a new one, I've actually lost mine. Yeah. Word of mouth is probably the most effective, for sure. Here, Kathy.
I know I'm freaking Pollyanna, but I got to say, I just went back in there and I came out with this great idea. What if we had like a parade thing after church on a Sunday downtown where we wore UU Church shirts, if you had them, or even a little sign? I mean, how could that be something bad? Just to show who we are and give people information in an area where we could be very visible.
Hey, Joe,
Yes,
there's a chat message from Reverend Dana.
yes.
She's saying Reverend Dana and Reemerging Membership Ministry are going to have a Bring a Friend to Church Sunday this year. Please
Excellent.
Please share.
Thank you, Reverend Dana. Now, we've covered a lot of ground today. I mean, not just finance, but some other issues that are on people's minds, and I think that's a great conversation to have. And maybe we need to do this more often, just as a general conversation, not necessarily finance, though that could be part of it. But if there's questions or ideas that people in the congregation might have, I think it's a good conversation to have. And Reverend Dana's talked about the post-pandemic church, and I think we're realizing that it is different. I know personally myself, if I'm traveling somewhere, I love having the remote access to the service. It's like, that's gold. I just love it. Some Sundays I'm like, I'm really getting out of bed, I'm getting dressed and moving along, and it's still available, which is great. You can still participate that way. So there is, we're looking at what does the post-pandemic church look like? One of the conversations we've had is that people, even just terminology, Here you go. I can use this for now. Generally speaking, people don't want to belong to committees. Okay, because what the term committee means, and sometimes it's justified, like the finance committee needs to be a committee because it is an ongoing, continuous operation, okay? But if you have a publicity committee, people would tend to balk at that, saying, that's going to take all kinds of time. Things like having a committee team, doing things tactically rather than, not everything has to be strategic. It can be part of a strategic plan, but not everything has to be strategic. You can have tactical things to get things done. Like what Reverend Dana was talking about, bring a friend to church Sunday. That doesn't have to be every week, but there are things like that we can do that will enhance us long term. And Bob's absolutely right. We're not an evangelical church whatsoever. So that's also part of the difficulty of, how do you split that and get the word out of who we are? It's a tough place to be, but it's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible. Any other questions? This has been a really great conversation, by the way. Gudrun? Yes.
Tail on, interesting, Mike. Just to dovetail on the getting it out there, I wear my name tag to the market. I also have anyone can buy one, not only a bumper sticker, but what is the thing that goes around the license? A license plate frame. It says Unitarian Universalist with a chalice logo. You can buy one for very little money through the UUA bookstore. I urge you to put one on your license plate. I have one. Take a look at my car when you see my car. And when you are in a parking lot, I've seen folks walk by mine and they're looking at that license plate cover. And once in a while, I'll be walking in the parking lot and somebody's looking at my license plate cover that says Unitarian Universalist, and they'll say, what is that? And I'll have a chance to do, like you said, Gary, the elevator speech. So I encourage you to buy a license plate cover. Thank you.
Gary?
UU jewelry, chalice jewelry. Christians wear a cross. Jewish folks wear a Star of David.
why can't you use Wear More Chalice jewelry? And this is just another invitation to have folks ask us, hey, what's that? And what does that mean? And so, yeah.
My thoughts are, where do we find the most number of people who attend local civic events? Do churches have booths like in the county fair in August? I think that, or sometimes don't they have booths like in a 4th of July parade? Is that something we would do?
We've done that.
We have done that.
Yeah, we have done that.
I think we need floats in every county parade. You can have fun making one and use it every year.
That's true. Ventura has the 4th of July parade every year. You want to do a float? We could do a float. These are all great ideas, but I think we need to think about these a little bit, and like I said, I'll bring it up to the board for discussion and maybe go back and, I'm thinking the next time I'll have a quarterly review will be in November, because by that time I should have September, August, I'm going backwards, July, August, September in the books by the end of October. So then I'll be able to come back in November, somewhere around the later part of the month, not Christmas, not gonna be Thanksgiving weekend, right? And then do this again, give you an update on the finances, and then, and I'll have a little more information like Dennis's question about how many pledging members. I'll have that in my back pocket too. Good. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for participating. You know, relationships, man, that's what it's all about. True. Thank you.